Hello friends and welcome to Zia IAS. Today we will be discussing about biogeochemical cycles. So this is the fifth lecture in this series in which we will be covering the entire portions for ecology and environment. So today we will be discussing about biogeochemical cycle, and this biogeochemical cycle is also called nutrient cycling. So this is also called nutrient cycling. Now, nutrient cycling or biogeochemical cycles, it is a function of the ecosystem. If you can recollect from the previous lecture, in the previous lectures we have discussed about the functions of ecosystem, and there we discussed there are primarily four functions. One is succession, that is ecological succession. If you can recollect, we have already discussed, and if you have missed the previous video, you can get the videos on our YouTube channel. Second one is homeostasis or feedback control mechanism. So feedback control mechanism is a second function. Third one is energy flow through the food chain, which we will be discussing, the food chain and the energy flow through the food chain. The fourth one is nutrient cycling, which we will be discussing today. So let's come to nutrient cycling. Now the energy that flows through the ecosystem is ultimately lost as heat. So energy which flows through the ecosystem, ultimately this is lost in the form of heat forever. But what happens to the nutrients? Nutrients and energy are different. So nutrients and energy. Now energy is lost through heat, whereas the nutrients of food matter, they never get used up and it can be recycled. So this is the basic difference between energy and nutrients, that the energy is lost in the form of heat, whereas the nutrients, they get recycled again and again indefinitely, whereas the energy is lost as heat forever. Now there are different types of energy cyclings like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. These are all elements and compounds which make up about 97% of the mass of our bodies, and also are more than 95% of the mass of living organisms. So these elements or the mineral nutrients, they are always in circulation, that is moving from non-living to living and then back to non-living. Okay, so they move from non-living to living organisms, then back to non-living organisms, and this is in a circular fashion, and this is called nutrient cycling, or what we call as biogeochemical cycling. So this circular fashion in which these elements travel from non-living to living and then back to non-living is called as biogeochemical cycling. Now why it is called biogeochemical cycling? Now here the term bio, it refers to living. So living, geo means atmosphere. So atmosphere. So that's why it's called biogeochemical cycling, from living to non-living and vice versa. It moves in a circular fashion. So this is called nutrient cycling or biogeochemical cycling. Now nutrient cycling, it describes how the nutrients move from physical environment to the living organisms and subsequently recycled back to the physical environment. So this is called nutrient cycling. Nutrient cycle is nothing but how the nutrients are moved from the physical environment. Now physical environment consists of non-living non-living components and to the living components, that is to the bio, that is components having life, and subsequently how they are recycled back to the physical environment, that is how they are recycled back to the non-living components. So this circular fashion is called as biogeochemical cycling. Now let us see what are the types of nutrient cycles. Based on the replacement period, we can categorize the nutrient cycles as perfect cycle and imperfect cycle. So this is based on replacement period. Now let's see what is a perfect cycle. Perfect cycle are where the nutrients are replaced as fast as they are utilized. So perfect cycle means here the replacement time is very less. Whereas in case of imperfect cycle, some nutrients are lost from the cycle and get locked into the sediments. So here imperfect cycle. In case of perfect cycle, all the nutrients are recycled back as fast as they are utilized. In case of imperfect cycle, some of the nutrients are lost in the cycle and they get locked into the sediments. Now examples of perfect cycle are carbon cycle and nitrogen cycle, which means that in case of carbon cycle and in case of nitrogen cycle, the nutrients are completely replaced as fast as the utilization is over. Now in case of imperfect cycles like the phosphorus cycle and the sulfur cycle, some of the nutrients are lost in between the recycling and they get locked into the sediments. Now based on the nature of the reservoir, again it can be, the nutrient cycling can be classified as gaseous or sedimentary cycle. The gaseous cycle is where the reservoir is the atmosphere or the hydrosphere. So gaseous cycle, hydrosphere or the atmosphere. Water cycle and carbon cycle are the examples of gaseous cycle, whereas sedimentary cycle is where the reservoir is the crust of the earth. Now the earth surface, it's divided into three parts: crust, mantle and the core. So crust of the earth is the reservoir for the sedimentary cycle. Sulfur cycle, calcium cycle, etc. are the examples of sedimentary cycles. Now we will take up each important cycle or nutrient cycling. First we will see carbon cycling. So carbon is a minor constituent of the atmosphere. We know that atmosphere majority is hydrogen and then oxygen. So carbon is a minor constituent of the atmosphere. Carbon is present in the atmosphere mainly in the form of carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. Now even though carbon is present only in small quantities in the atmosphere, it is very important. Why? Because carbon being a greenhouse gas or carbon dioxide being a greenhouse gas, it's very important to keep the temperature of the earth warm. So it keeps the earth warm. And when the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the quantity of carbon dioxide increases, it leads to global warming or what we call as increase in the temperature. The carbon from the atmosphere, it moves to green plants by the process of photosynthesis and then to the animals. Now we are discussing about the cycle. So carbon which is found in the atmosphere, which is naturally found in the atmosphere, from there it moves to the green plants. Now why green plants? Green plants are the producers which are capable of producing their own food by the process of photosynthesis. So green plants absorb the carbon present in the atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis. Then this is transmitted to the animals, which are the consumers. Now by the process of respiration and decomposition of dead organic matter, it returns back to the atmosphere. Now we will discuss the cycle. As we said, this is circular in fashion or it's circular in nature. Now the first step is the natural carbon which is present in the atmosphere. Now this carbon which is present in the atmosphere, this is taken up by the plants in the process of photosynthesis. We know that plants are the producers. So these plants take up this carbon dioxide or carbon which is present in the atmosphere for photosynthesis and they produce the food. Now these plants are eaten up by the animals who are the consumers. So animals being the consumers, they eat these plants. Now when these animals are dead, by the process of respiration and decomposition of dead organic matter. So when these animals die, the dead organic matter contains carbon. So carbon is present in this dead organic matter, then this returns back to the atmosphere. So this is how the carbon cycle functions in a ecosystem. Now some carbon also enters a long-term cycle by accumulating as undecomposed organic matter or as insoluble carbonates. So we said that when this dead organic matter is formed, that is after the death of these animals, this dead organic matter and also by respiration and decomposition. So by the decomposition of the dead organic matter, the carbon again enters into the atmosphere. But sometimes some carbon enters into long-term cycle. How? By accumulating undecomposed organic matter. Undecomposed organic matter means some organic matter remains undecomposed. So they becomes undecomposed organic matter, or they remain as insoluble carbonates. Now in deep oceans, rocks may be exposed to erosion, releasing their carbon dioxide. Now how this happens in deep oceans? So the first one we discussed about the terrestrial ecosystem. Here in an aquatic ecosystem or in the hydrosphere, how does this happen? In deep oceans, the rocks may be exposed to erosion. So during this process of erosion, they release carbon dioxide, carbonates and bicarbonates into the streams and the rivers. So the process of erosion, through the process of erosion, these rocks present in the deep oceans, they expose or release some carbon dioxide, carbonates and bicarbonates into the streams and rivers. When the fossil fuels such as coal, oil and natural gas etc. are burned, the carbon stored in them is released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So this is the cycle. Now let's try to understand this through a picture. So here we will see that naturally carbon is present in the atmosphere. This is taken up by the plants for the process of photosynthesis. Now this is the plants which will take it up. Then after that these plants are consumed by animals. Then what happens? The dead and the decayed matter, the microbial respiration and decomposition happens. Then it reaches back to the atmosphere. Okay. So this is similarly how it happens in an ocean ecosystem. So in an ocean ecosystem. Next we will discuss about the nitrogen cycle. Now nitrogen is an essential constituent of protein and it is also a basic building block of living tissue. And also apart from the carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, nitrogen is the most prevalent element in the living organisms. And nitrogen, it's a constituent of amino acid, protein, hormone, chlorophyll, vitamins, etc. So if you read the NCERTs, you will get better understanding about the nitrogen fixation, etc. We will discuss anyways. So nitrogen is present in amino acids, proteins, hormones, chlorophylls, etc. And another important thing is that nitrogen is a limiting nutrient. Why nitrogen is a limiting nutrient for both natural and agricultural ecosystem? It is because the plants compete with the microbes for the limited nitrogen that is available in the soil. So where there is limited nitrogen available in the soil, and the plants and the microbes compete with each other for this nitrogen. Now nitrogen in its elemental form cannot be used by most of the living organisms. Now what happens in the nature? The lightning and the UV radiations, ultraviolet radiations, provide energy to convert nitrogen to nitrogen oxides. So what are nitrogen oxides? It is NO, NO2 and N2O. So these are the nitrogen oxides. So nitrogen in its elemental form, it cannot be used by the living organisms. Through lightning and UV radiations, it is converted to oxides of nitrogen. Now nitrogen needs to be converted to ammonia, nitrites or nitrates so that the plants can take up. Now the nitrogen fixation. So it is done by either microorganisms or by human beings. Now microorganisms, they can naturally fix the nitrogen. That is why we call it as nitrogen fixing bacteria. If you have heard about nitrogen fixing bacteria which lives in the root nodules. So root nodules, nitrogen fixing bacteria is present. They can naturally fix the nitrogen. Now by human beings, how? Through industrial processes and by atmospheric phenomena like such as thunder and lightning. So nitrogen fixation can be done either by microorganisms, or by human beings, or naturally by the atmosphere itself by lightning or by UV radiations. Now let's see. These are the steps involved in the nitrogen cycle. First one is nitrogen fixing. That is, first step is nitrogen fixing. As we said, it can be done by microorganisms, human beings or by the atmosphere itself. So under nitrogen fixing, nitrogen is converted into ammonia or ammonium ions. Then after this, second step is the nitrification. Here the ammonia which is developed through the process of nitrogen fixing or the ammonium ions, it is converted into nitrite. Then nitrite is converted into nitrite. Then third step is ammonification, that is the dead matter plus the animal waste. So it creates ammonification. So through that, ammonia or ammonium ions is released. Next is denitrification, that is the nitrates again getting converted into nitrogen. So this is the cycle. Next we will see the details. So how this happens, certain microorganisms, that is what we said, nitrogen fixing bacteria. So this is the microorganism. Certain microorganisms are capable of fixing the atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia, which is NH3, and as ammonium ions NH4 plus. So certain microorganisms like the nitrogen fixing bacteria, they convert the atmospheric nitrogen. So atmospheric nitrogen is converted into either ammonia or ammonium ions, and this is done using the nitrogenous enzyme. Now free living nitrogen fixing bacteria, these are certain examples of nitrogen fixing bacteria. Now fixing aerobic and anaerobic. So aerobic we will see first, Azotobacter and Biogeochemical. So these are certain aerobic bacteria, and anaerobic bacteria such as Clostridium and Rhodospirillum. So Azotobacter is very popular, very much heard of. So this is not very important, just to understand. So free nitrogen fixing bacteria, living nitrogen fixing bacteria, these are certain examples. Now there is a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic means both the individuals are benefited. So symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria, example rhizobium, living in association with leguminous plants and non-leguminous root nodule plants. So this is an example of symbiotic relationship of nitrogen fixing bacteria like the rhizobium with that of leguminous plants or non-leguminous root nodule plants. Now cyanobacteria like the nostoc, Anabaena, Spirulina, etc. Now after this, in the first step what happens, certain microorganisms they fix the nitrogen present in the atmosphere. So atmospheric nitrogen is converted into NH3, which is ammonia, or NH4 plus, that is ammonium ions. Now what happens next is nitrification, that is this ammonia or ammonium ions which is produced or which is created by the nitrogen fixing bacteria is converted into nitrates. So here the ammonium ions get oxidized to nitrate by the bacteria Nitrosomonas or Nitrococcus. So here again certain bacteria convert this ammonium ions or ammonia into nitrates. So this is done by oxidation. So this is done by the process of oxidation. The nitrate further get oxidized to become nitrate. So from nitrite to nitrate with the help of bacterium Nitrobacter. Now the nitrate thus formed is absorbed by the plants. Now let's see the process again. Now first one, atmospheric nitrogen. So nitrogen which is present in the atmosphere. So atmospheric nitrogen, it is converted into ammonia or ammonium ions by the nitrogen fixing bacteria. Now through the process of oxidation, it is converted into nitrites. Nitrites, again through further oxidation, it is further converted into nitrates. Now this nitrates is absorbed by the plants. Now next is ammonification. urea and uric acid are nitrogenous waste produced by the living organisms, and this was also a previous year question asked by the UPSC. Certain options were given like excretion of urea by animals, whether it is a natural or whether it is a source of addition of nitrogen to the soil. So urea and uric acid are the nitrogenous waste produced by the living organisms. So these waste products as well as the dead remains of the organisms are converted back into inorganic ammonia and ammonium ions. So this is again the cycling. So here the living organisms produce nitrogenous waste like the urea and the uric acid. So these are nitrogenous waste produced by the living organisms. Further, what happens? These waste products as well as the dead remains of the organisms, so they together combine together and they are converted into inorganic ammonia and ammonium ions. If you remember, the atmospheric nitrogen was converted into ammonia and ammonium ions by the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So here it is again converted back into ammonia and ammonium ions, and through the process of denitrification this nitrate is converted into again nitrogen. So nitrate present in the soil is reduced to nitrogen by denitrification. Now these are the denitrifying bacteria. Now if there is any confusion, we will take up a figure to understand it better. Now the first thing, the atmospheric nitrogen. So this atmospheric nitrogen is taken up by the nitrogen bacteria or nitrogen fixing bacteria which lives in the root nodules. So here the nitrogen fixing bacteria takes it up which lives in the root nodules. Now this is the root nodules of plants. Okay. Then further the nitrogen fixing bacteria creates ammonium. This is called ammonification, ammonium and ammonium ions. Okay. Then what happens? Again through the process of further oxidation, nitrates are created, and further oxidation, nitrites are created. So all this is done by bacteria. Then this nitrates, it reaches back the atmospheric nitrogen. Now again coming back to the cycle, the atmospheric nitrogen which is taken up by the nitrogen fixing bacteria living in root nodules. So here the root nodules of plants takes it up. Now this plant can be eaten by rabbits. Okay. Then what happens? Through the food chain or the food web, it finally decomposes and then reaches back the atmosphere. So similarly here we will see that the nitrogen fixing bacteria plays a major role. So here we will see either it reaches back to the atmosphere through this cycle, or in between it can be consumed by certain animals, living organisms, and we have seen how again the living organisms, urea and uric acid, how it is again reach to the atmosphere. So here again the lightning, these are the natural or atmospheric sources, the lightning and the UV radiations. So again it reaches back the atmosphere. So this is how the nitrogen cycle in the ecosystem takes place. So today we will wind it up here. Next lecture we will take up the other cycles as well. Thank you for watching. Please do share this video if you have liked it. Thank you.